The golden sister ditched her kids for a sugar daddy, then threatened my job, but I recorded her and reported it all to CPS. Seriously, where to start? I sometimes think my life is a twisted soap opera. Not luxurious palaces and villains. Every trailer park character has a secret, a grudge, and many awful mistakes. Allow me to explain. My name is Eleanor, but everyone calls me Ellie. I don't always think positively, but my sister Bianca is different. She left her kids with me for 8 weeks. So I acted. Golden children are never as pure as their parents think. Bianca always wanted a child and got away with being mean to me, because she was the golden miracle child. My sister was attractive because she had lovely eyes and thick curls. Dolores, my mother, compared our looks forever. I have straight hair and dark eyes. After we were teens, my mom loved comparing us. She kept telling me to dress like Bianca and teach me makeup if I asked her for help looking beautiful. She would bully and tease me, so we grew up resentful of each other. Bianca gravitated toward my mother's worst traits. While I rejected them, I think my mom's constant praise for her beauty turned her into a horrible person who thinks she can get away with anything. I have low self-esteem, and I'm quiet as an adult because my mom compared us and put me down. I've been in therapy to strengthen my spine, even though it's hard for me to stand up for myself. In my relationships for the first time, I feel like my family screwed me up. I struggled to maintain healthy friendships and love connections. After learning the truth, my parents told me to let bygones be bygones, and not even Bianca was given out. I realized then how much they preferred her over me. Her only request was to take something from me. I felt like no man would ever defend me or consider me as valuable. Because my dad, Arthur, saw my mom mentally abuse me my whole life. Being the ugly sister meant I had no social life and spent all my time studying. I graduated high school with a 4.0 and got a full ride at my top university, which was great, because my mom told me the night before I started high school that she was paying for Bianca's college, since she was the oldest, but I would have to pay for community college. I cried and asked her why she didn't love me as much as she loved Bianca, and she said she did. But I spent all day excited to tell my parents about my scholarship. I suppose I was glad to have something. Bianca didn't. My parents didn't mind her partying and getting bad grades in high school, and she only went to college because they could afford it. Her grades were so bad she wasn't going to a good one. After I told my parents about my scholarship, Arthur said, "Nice job," and my mom didn't look up from her phone or respond. She ignored me for a week. I tried to ask her why. She was furious at me for getting a college scholarship, but she ignored me and went into another room. Her hatred for me winning a scholarship, when most parents would be thrilled, was extreme. Why am I messed up and resenting her? Whatever. I realized how alone I was, and how much my family wanted me to feel secluded. Then why did my mom hate me for life and make me hate myself? One of my darkest days was when I earned my scholarship and wept myself to sleep. Accepting that I would never have a family who loved me like Bianca, I hated her for it that night. I journaled my life goals until sunrise. It relieved the sting, but I still carry that mess. Instead of throwing myself a pity party and begging my parents for love and attention, I would focus on my studies as I always did, and give myself something they couldn't: stability, independence, intellect, and education. I graduated with honors, interned for a great company right out of college, and when I got home for the holidays, I would tell my family how I was doing, and get occasional praises from extended family, but my parents never acknowledged or congratulated me on my adult accomplishments. I knew telling my mom about my high position at work or my salary would make her hate me more. But I told my dad, Arthur, and one year he said he was delighted at Christmas dinner. One year my uncle congratulated me on a promotion I told him about earlier that day, and a big raise at the company. He heard me talk about buying my first house, and was surprised by the friendly congratulations from my uncle and other extended family members. My mom interrupted me when another cousin asked me where I was house hunting, and said, "This is boring. Can we change the subject?" Then she murmured, "It's probably not even true." Anyway, very supportive mother. My family enjoyed my social media post after buying my house. Later that year, except for my mom, Dolores, who was probably angry, because my sister had a very different life than me. My parents paid for her college education after high school, but she failed out and got pregnant by her first boyfriend. My parents may have asked her to terminate the pregnancy, but she kept it and tried to work with her 4-month-old baby dad. When I saw her post about having a second child, I had to hold back tears, since I knew the baby would be born into a poisonous environment. Since my sister and her baby dad were so bad, I encountered him around the holidays, but he never remembered my name. or spoke to me despite not bringing anything. He brought trays of food home every year. Bianca and I didn't talk after we left our parents' house, so our relationship didn't improve. I had Bianca on social media, and when we saw one other during the holidays, she made unpleasant comments about my weight and clothes. I suppose she was projecting, since I wear a lot of designer outfits and cycle through designer purses. She kept asking me what phony purse I brought this time. I rolled my eyes so hard, I thought they would come out when she looked me up and down and said, "I see you're dressed up again like the stuck-up bitch you are." The rudeness was outrageous. Despite her small children, she would humiliate me in front of them with curses and everything. I don't feel bad saying my sister is trash or for what I did. After she left her kids on my doorstep after a long work week, I was relaxing in my house one weekend morning when my doorbell rang. My sisters Daniel, 10, and Samuel, 7, were waiting on my front porch with overnight bags. They told me their mom was on vacation for 8 weeks, and that I was watching them since my nephews were cool. Quiet and puzzled, I let them inside while I called my sister. Bianca ignored my first 10 calls, but I persisted until she answered. I told her I wouldn't watch her kids, and would call CPS if she didn't pick them up right away. She dropped a bombshell while I was Googling CPS on speaker, after she threatened to contact my job and tell them I wasn't taking my bipolar medication and fire me. I hung up and thought about what to do. Stress made me think my skull might burst a month later. I was going to Australia to visit my long-distance boyfriend, Oliver. I have no idea who to call other than my mom, Dolores, and she usually sided with my sister, so I shouldn't have been surprised. I told my mom that my sister hadn't even dropped off her kids, and she stated they were old enough to come to my house alone. My mom started guilting me, claiming my sister has done a lot for me, and I ought to help her one time. As I never did, that drove me insane, and I screamed at her to tell me. One time, my sister helped me or improved my life. I informed my mom that she and my sister had never supported me and treated me like an unwashed dog in their house. If necessary, I requested my mom visit me, so I could leave her in my house while I flew to Australia. As my nephew's caregivers, I doubted my sister would bring her kids back from her trip. Because she dumped them on me, Dolores, my mom, arrived at my house cold and glared at me in my living room. My mom informed me I was being a horrible sister again and lectured me on family support. I ignored my mom's gibberish and questioned what kind of trip my sister was on that was so essential that she would neglect her kids and leave them with someone who hated her. I told my mom everything seemed unusual and suspicious, and my sister abandoning 2 tiny kids for 8 weeks felt improper. I wanted the truth if I was participating without consent. Mom's face changed and she said my sister wasn't on vacation. Her sugar dad flew her away. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she was serious because I was emotionally exhausted. I freaked out on my mom and asked how she could be okay. I told her she had a loser daughter who departed the country to see a sugar daddy instead of working to support her kids. Mom countered me and defended my sister again. Even if I had a lot of money or a beautiful house, I would always be the ugly duckling compared to Bianca. Born ugly and dying ugly, I had to stop myself from seizing her shirt and shoving her out of my house. After she said that, I yelled at my mom to leave, but she refused, and when I tried to get her out, she pushed me into a coffee table with one of my favorite vases, which Oliver gave me the last time he visited. I got DoorDash for everyone and let them watch movies and play video games in my living room until they passed out when I finally reached her. I yelled at her for ruining my life and mentioned CPS again. Bianca laughed sinisterly over the phone and told me I could watch her kids or lose my job. She said I was nothing without my job and would be a loser without it. This hurt because it was true. I had a degree and a good resume, but I associated it with my work success and would do anything to keep it. I cried and asked my sister why she despised me and left her kids for a sugar daddy. She suggested she could make millions from a sugar daddy in 2 months, so I didn't care. She was probably attempting to break me down and make me feel tiny. So I gave up. Actually, it was functioning. After a final threat of contacting my employment, my sister hung up on me and I broke down in tears again, realizing I had no power over her. In private upstairs, I called my sweetheart, Oliver, while my nephews watched a movie in the family room. I cried and told him everything. After my nephews were left on my porch, I sobbed as I told him about my sister's threats, my mom's hatred, and how she trapped me. My partner, who lives across the world, made me feel loved and supported and was my only ally, he said. My sister was maybe committing multiple crimes by abandoning her kids and intimidating me with professional blackmail, and needed proof. He recommended me to call my sister again. and urge her to repeat her warning concerning the fake medical claims, but secretly record the conversation as evidence. Oliver knew about my background with my sister and my parents, and said my sister was definitely unstable, and could act on her threat at any time. So I should prepare. I was terrified. But he was right. I knew my sister was insane more than anyone. So I followed his plan while being emotionally overwhelmed still. I wanted my nephews to feel safe and cared for. I understood what it was like to be a child in an unwanted household, and I didn't want to make these innocent little guys linked to me feel that way. I played a multiplayer video game with them downstairs and enjoyed it. When I learned how to play first-person shooters, they were shocked and laughed as I killed after kill. After a hectic weekend, I wasn't expecting to bond with them, but when we ordered pizza and competed to eat the most pepperoni, I found I adored the two tiny guys. They were unlike their mother. Even though I knew my sister couldn't have been a good mom, they were both polite and sweet. Hilarious little guys, even though it took them a long time to open up. They always said please and thank you and cleaned up well. While hanging out with my nephews in the afternoon, I saw that they both had holes in their socks and that my older nephew's pants were too small. I found all the clothes my sister had brought for them to be too old or undersized for the boys again. I wasn't surprised that my sister was a cheap, irresponsible parent, so I took my nephew shopping for new clothes. I nearly stabbed myself several times at the mall because my nephews burst out of their shells and ran around excitedly. I remember being ignored as a child, so I wanted them to feel like they could have anything they wanted, and that I was there for them and wanted to make them happy. When we passed a window and they wanted to go into a store, we went in and I bought them whatever they wanted. After I gave them the Switches, they both cried and hugged me, and I saw Daniel 10 crying again on the way home and asked him if he was okay. He asked me why I was so nice to them and why they deserved it. I told him they were my boys and kids, so they deserve happiness. He started crying more and said he was mad at his mom for separating us. This hurt my heart and I told him I was sorry. We each after a large dinner at home. They played Switches together all night. I left them alone in the living room to phone my sister again. In my room to execute my boyfriend's plan. The phone call was easy to push toward the medical accusation, but I attempted to keep cool, while wanting to call my sister every name in the book. When I mentioned CPS again, my sister freaked out and threatened me, claiming I would get fired for being a crazy secret, and that nobody would know if she was lying about taking my medication. She kept telling me that nobody would believe a crazy sick like me, and that I didn't deserve my work. I suspect my sister was high during this call, since she sounded strung up and kept repeating odd stuff. After getting what I needed from the conversation, I hung up on my sister. Since she kept claiming I didn't deserve anything in life whatever, I ignored her statements to record the entire call. My sister was videotaped, indicating she would submit bogus medical claims to my employer. I recognized how smart my partner was to advise collecting this video, and I emotionally prepared for the impact. If my sister followed through on her threat, after the recording I tried to relax and put my nephews to bed. I called CPS as soon as the line opened the next morning and explained everything. I told them my sister abandoned her children and we were estranged. I even claimed she had abandoned them under false pretenses, and then used manipulation and compulsion to get me to care for them. CPS shocked me by being helpful, so I shared the recording. I don't know why I answered my mom's phone the next day, but I got into another massive phone battle with her because I was still bewildered and emotionally weak. My mom hung up when I told her I called CPS, so my sister would pay for her treatment of me. After I had a terrible night, my receptionist told me that my boss had arranged an urgent meeting with me. Before lunch the next morning, I was apprehensive, but I knew it was coming. It was obvious that in the meeting, my two superiors and a new boss looked at me suspiciously and told me that a trustworthy family member had told them. I may be unmedicated for a severe mental disorder, they told me. They had been provided extensive details about my past mental breaks and were worried about me having a psychotic break at work. I was prepared for this meeting. My briefcase contained my doctor's letter and medication schedule, documentation from my managers. I had over 5 years of proof that I never missed a prescription pickup date and had regular moods and medicines. Primary care physician, therapist, and psychiatrist confirmed. I briefly but comprehensively informed my supervisors of my family's problems and my sister's mental health issues, and assured them the claims were unfounded, and that my medical records would verify my stability. My bosses took a moment to read through all the material, but once they realized that I had medical evidence from different MDs, They looked satisfied and apologized for calling me into this meeting, stating that they had to perform their due diligence before closing this case. My one supervisor even congratulated me on a successful quarter and brags about my accomplishments to the other supervisors, making me look wonderful. I giggled at how well the conference went despite its objective and thought about my sister's silly plan failing. I smiled dumbly every time. I thought about calling my sister after work to tell her her plan had failed, so I couldn't focus on my work. When I got back to my car that day, I called my sister and almost cried, laughing as I told her the meeting had only taken 15 minutes, since she sounded mad and idiotic on the phone, and my bosses had never believed her. My sister was outraged and accused me of lying to save face, after thinking I had been fired. This made me laugh harder, and I told her she had failed at firing me. Like everything else, her children were upset because she could only lie and fail. At 40, my sister lost it again and called me the B word and C word, stating I had betrayed her, and that she was catching the first plane back. To make me regret all I did to her, I laughed after the conversation. But when I got home and saw my nephews, who were happier since having DoorDash, I knew this could become worse. I only knew my sister was insane and coming home to avenge me. I realized I was worried about the future. I worried about my sister because she had little to lose and was unstable. I thought about my nephews. I considered contacting CPS wrong. I wish my sister had lost her passport abroad and never returned. I had become closer to my nephews in the past few days, so I knew their departure would ache. I loathed leaving. I didn't want them back with my sister. Because she was doing what my mom did to me, I hated her more than anyone else. Since my thoughts was racing, I checked on my sleeping nephews and grieved discreetly in the hallway. After closing the guest room door, this was unfair to innocent boys. Next day was a sham. The door knock sounded like a sandbag being slapped on my front door. I opened it and saw Bianca next to a 6'5", 300-pound man. I could fit my head in one of his huge palms. I can just see my mom Dolores behind him, and before I could say anything to warn them to leave, the man put his hand on my shoulder and shoved me down. Bianca, my mom, and the stranger entered my house, and I fell to my floor with a shoulder injury from the man's throat. My sister brought the stranger to my house, and I yelled at him not to touch me, but he only spoke Russian. Before my sister beat CPS to my house, I didn't understand they'll arrive about 11 a.m. Nonetheless, my sister shattered my door at 8:00 a.m. My nephews left the guest room sleepy after the commotion woke them. I tried to protect them. But my sister barked at the stranger to put my nephews in the car. Absolute chaos after realizing what was happening. My nephews asked my sister to leave them with me. When I tried to take him from the giant stranger again, my oldest nephew Daniel grabbed my head and threw it into the wall. I saw stars and watched him carry my two nephews out of my house. While lying on the floor, nothing I could do. My mom cried too, but went with them before they left my house. My sister came over as I cradled my head in my hands and spit at me directly in the face. When I looked up, it was one of my darkest days. And the worst thing anyone has ever done to me? They left in a huge black Suburban I had never seen my sister in. I didn't know the man, and I couldn't believe my sister had traumatized everyone. She didn't let them take anything without clothing, switches or breakfast they left. I felt terrible for them and had my first anxiety episode. I loved my nephews with all my heart and wanted to protect and care for them, like I never had when I was their age. But I didn't understand how much it would hurt. However, they were afraid. Shoeless and in a car with my insane sister and a huge stranger. I hated my mom's actions. I couldn't believe she stood by, while that large man threw me around in my home and pulled my nephews out of their aunt's house without a word. My family had grown so wicked, and I couldn't stop worrying about my nephews. After settling down after my anxiety attack, I knew I had to act fast because time was running out. After calming down, I called the police, who were aware of the investigation. Because Child Protective Services had a case against my sister, I told them everything that transpired at my home minutes before, and the officer on the phone was helpful. My voice shook as I described the stranger, but I tried to stay cool and remember the license plate. I memorized every number and letter on the Suburban's license plate, because my profession is important, and I'm used to observing and retaining information. Most miss I told police about the guy, his car plate, and my mom and sister's clothes. I think my sister came to my house drunk that morning. She looked savage with wild eyes. She probably started using drugs. When she went abroad with her sugar daddy, something shattered in my crazy sister, and she was never so disconnected. After telling the police everything I remembered about my sister, in the car they drove away in, I hung up and tried to forget. But I couldn't eat. Nap or watch TV. I saw my nephews' faces every time I closed my eyes, and could only worry for them. I pondered why my mom always made excuses for my sister, and how it made her horrible. I even thought about my sister's trip, what she did if she had a sugar daddy and how much he paid her. I wondered if her trip earnings were worthwhile. I considered a scenario with just me and my nephews. Now I had heart space for them. As I considered it, I wanted that result. My sister out and just me and my nephews. I could offer them everything my sister couldn't. And if my sister and I went to court over my nephews, the judge would witness one lady with an offshore sugar daddy, and another with many degrees and a penthouse office. I tried to be positive, but random, gloomy concerns concerning my nephew's safety kept returning. Maybe the huge man she brought to my house was her sugar daddy. Maybe he was with my nephews. The cops contacted me while I was on my couch staring at the ceiling, overthinking and forgetful of time. The suburban my sister left in was located after hours of searching. After calling me, my first officer was helpful and provided lots of details. He stated 3 police cars stopped the black SUV because the man was violent. That morning, despite drawing firearms, the suspect ran forward and hurt one officer in the thigh. A female cop got black-eyed and 2 officers were head-punched. Sister punched cop trying to jail her. I imagine my wild sister and the gigantic stranger fighting police on the highway shoulder. I couldn't believe my family was experiencing this. And not just watching reality TV, I was still in shock. From the officer's account of my sister's detention, when he said she wanted to talk to me, he confirmed that my sister planned to use her one call on me. She's shouting about asking for bail money. A huge mess, even though my sister was in prison. I learned my nephews were in CPS custody, and while they were safe, I was frightened. I had a week until my Australia trip, and if I didn't travel, I'd lose thousands in bookings. Canceling this trip would have disrespected my boyfriend's family. Before I met them, I wanted to marry my lover, so I didn't want to do that. I called CPS to check on my nephews, but was denied a meeting. I told them I was their only psychologically stable family, but they didn't care I faced a tough new department. I was emotionally exhausted and had no choice. I prepared for my vacation and cried spontaneously, thinking about my nephews and where they were through the week. My girlfriend and I had been waiting for this trip for so long. And suddenly I was distracted and anxious. The week before my departure, my worry and tension dominated our conversations. My partner was courteous and supportive as always. But I was so angry at my sister for how she had treated her nephews and me, and I couldn't believe how much my life had altered because of her one choice to visit her foolish sugar daddy. I was glad my employment was understood. But thinking about how my sister tried to fire me so soon made me feel deceived and afraid of my family. Even my dad Arthur was away and oblivious of all this strife, but he knew he was spineless like my useless mother. My mother didn't care for her grandchildren, since she let my sister's bad decisions put them with strangers. After 2 glasses at the airport bar on my way to Australia, I looked at photos of my nephew staying with me. Taking these silly mall photo booth photographs together made me cry again over missing them. I vowed not to cry again till I returned to America, and enjoyed my time with my sweetheart and his family. Even from abroad, I couldn't let my sister ruin my life. Great trip to Australia. I was overjoyed when my lover ran to me in the airport and lifted me up princess style. I hadn't seen him in months. Returning to my boyfriend's loving embrace felt great. After 2 weeks of agony, he looked after me during vacation. Meeting his parents made me like them, both fun, active folks. Took me to their favorite neighborhood nature walks and views. We hiked to his favorite secret waterfall. Skinny dipped, swam, laughed, and kissed for hours. I was apprehensive before leaving, but it was one of my most romantic days, and I couldn't believe how wonderfully the vacation went. After returning to the US, I went to the local police station to file charges against my sister, Bianca, and my mother Dolores for breaking into my home. They had the man lift me up and throw me to the side to barge in, and I wouldn't let that happen. When I went to submit the charge, I learned that CPS was investigating my sister, and I was furious that they hadn't found anything yet. I left the police station happy that my family was charged, but unhappy because the CPS investigation was ongoing. I worried about my nephew's safety and knew that being with strangers, even if better than my sister, couldn't be good for them. I also couldn't stop thinking about how my sister had hauled them out of my house that morning without letting them take anything. Samuel, my youngest nephew, carried this plushy dog everywhere. A month after my sister's incarceration, CPS reached a resolution by taking both my nephews from her custody and placing them in protective custody. I was annoyed when the CPS agent explained this. I asked how that was different from what had been going on, and they said my sister would have to go to court again if she wanted custody of her kids. I questioned the CBS. I immediately filed a separate court petition to acquire custody of my nephews. I knew my custody case would be one of the toughest, so I engaged the best lawyer I could afford, regardless of time or cost. I dragged my sister to court because she broke into my home, but I would have fist-fought her in a Wendy's parking lot. At that point, if I wanted custody of my nephews, I had to obey the law that was my main goal, to get my sister out and my nephews home. The judge mentioned that I had filed a custody lawsuit against my sister for full custody of my nephews. On the first day of our trial, my sister's public defender hadn't told her earlier, so she learned in court my sister has never handled bad news well, and when the judge revealed my custody allegations against her, she snapped despite being in a courtroom. My sister cautiously angled toward me, screamed my name, and then pounced like a hyena. She scratched my face and tried to pull out my hair. The bailiff quickly pulled her away from me, but she bit my forearm hard before he did the bite. Looked bad and got infected. And it was one of the worst aches I had ever felt. I knew my sister had sealed her destiny. After everything settled down in front of the judge, my sister was imprisoned for all her offenses. After 2 years, her appeal chances were poor, because she was serving life without parole for many offenses. Dolores, my mother, evaded prison by testifying against my sister and threw her under the bus. I never dropped the breaking and entering accusations. The best part was seeing my mom blame my sister for everything, while screaming crocodile tears, even after a lifetime of government aid. I couldn't believe my mom betrayed her perfect golden child. Staring at my mom on the stand that day, I knew I would never see her again. Never wanted to see her again. A lifetime of observing her and my sister's toxicity exhausted me. My sister made my life a never-ending court battle, and I wanted a normal life. My nephew's birth father and his family sued me for full custody. Prolonging the process, I didn't care. My sister's imprisonment meant no force on earth could keep me from them. After almost 2 years of court battles, I regained full custody of Daniel and Samuel. The smile and hug they gave me when they got home, to find their bedrooms decorated for them, will never leave me in my younger nephew Samuel's bedroom. He rushed to show me his rediscovered Switch. I surprised him with his plush doggy and hugged him tightly. When he collapsed, my oldest nephew Daniel joined us, and both boys cried into my hair and told me they missed me. My oldest son grinned at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I knew it, Auntie. You would return for us." I knew in the company of my 2 favorite boys. I found my family, not my birth family. It was perfect. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking, real-life stories happening around you.